Good afternoon, brethren, and welcome to all our brethren who are tuning in today on the internet. Glad to have you with us. Today, my sermonette is a little different. I'm going to call it A Different Spirit. Have any of you felt at times that you're a little different than your friends? Yeah, I think we have. Hebrews 11 reminds us that ordinary people who had their faults and made mistakes can endure to the end. We have their stories as well as the stories of many others and our friends in the church who are called to meet Christ, who will be called to meet Christ at his return. We have the Bible telling us to endure and telling us how to do it. But if we condense all of these obligations onto 2 or 3 things that will get us to that moment of liftoff from earth, what would these things be? There is a story that I think has a very good answer to that question. Please turn to Numbers 14:24. Numbers 14:24. This person isn't someone from Hebrews 11. This man could be included in the list, but he isn't. Even though his story is an amazing one, and it's a great deal to tell us. Who is this guy? Numbers 14:24. Reading from the ISV. Now, as to my servant, Caleb, because a different spirit is within him, and he has remained true to me, I'm going to bring him into the land that he explored, and his descendants are to inherit it. We know the story. It's when Moses was told by God to choose a man from each tribe, a leader, to spy out the land God had given to them. They were to bring back fruit from the land and report on the people and the cities as well as the land. When they came back, they had the fruit, and they all agreed this was really a land of milk and honey. But 10 of them said, it's impossible to take this land from the inhabitants. They're stronger than us. We're like grasshoppers compared to them. That's what the 10 said. We're not able to go up against it. The other 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, tried to reassure the people. God has given us this land. What are you worried about? But no one would listen to them. Think about that. Think about it. Think about what Israel has seen from God. They've seen water change to blood, frogs, boils, darkness, the death of the Egypt's firstborn, the sea held back from their escape, and the drowning of Pharaoh's army, the most powerful army in the world at that time. They had been given bread from heaven, water from a rock, cloud by day and fire by night. There was God's presence in the mountain and Moses' shining face after he came down. After all these miracles, they thought God was bringing them into a land to be killed. It was 10-2, and of course, the people believed the 10. The people wanted to go home to Egypt, to the devil they knew. Caleb and Joshua tried to calm them. If God delights in us, he will bring us into the land and give it to us, they said. What did the people say? Let's stone these guys. Only 4, Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb, understood what was happening. Israel was rejecting God. They were accusing him of being a liar and a murderer. Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. Caleb and Joshua tore their clothes. God was ready to strike Israel with pestilence and disinherit them. But Moses, man he was, pleaded with God again. The Lord relented, but he said, those 20 and older will not enter the land except for Caleb and Joshua. Why did Caleb and Joshua have such a different spirit? Why did they see things so differently than all the others? They had a different spirit. What did God see in Caleb? What is a different spirit? Numbers 14:24. God said, because a different spirit is within him, he has remained true to me. I'm going to bring him into the land that he explored, and the descendants are to inherit it. Both Caleb and Joshua were faithful and believed God. Throughout the gospel, we see Jesus telling the people to believe. He knows belief doesn't come easily. People cling to what they know. Whatever is their safety net. It might be another person, their job, their experiences. They tell themselves, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it's going to be. The Israelites had a long experience of being slaves, and they weren't able, or maybe were not willing to let go of the slave type of thinking. It's a difficult life, but we know what to expect. Because both Caleb and Joshua were faithful, God kept his promise to be with them and to keep them safe. He had brought them to the land of milk and honey, and as he said he would, they believed, and he would give it to them just as he said he would. Caleb's belief was one thing that made his spirit different, that made him able to follow God. He knew that God had given them the land, but they had to go in and possess it. The people were led by fear. Caleb was led by the Spirit. We know an all-powerful God would fulfill his plan for his people. When the people spoke out against God, Caleb said, don't fear. He said the people in the land had lost their protection. We will be able to overcome them. Don't be afraid. Caleb's only fear was what God would do to the people for turning against him. The people wouldn't be silenced. They didn't trust God. They were angry with him. They had no fear of letting God know who had drowned the most powerful army in the world. Let him know they had no trust. Caleb had a fear of the Lord that was a different spirit than the others. In Psalms, David speaks out about fear of the Lord. He says it is the beginning of wisdom. In Isaiah 66, God tells us, I will look to the one who is humble and with a contrite spirit, and who trembles at my word. Caleb believed what he had seen God do. He believed what God said he would do. And he had a fear that made him not want to disobey God. He wanted the promise that he was to receive. He wanted the land he was to go get. For 40 more years, Caleb and Joshua wandered with the others in the wilderness until an unfaithful generation was gone. 40 more years they had to wait, but they never lost their vision. Before the children of the unfaithful entered the land, before the children of the unfaithful entered the land, Moses reminded them of the purposes God had made with those two faithful men. The only men who would inherit the land, and Moses told them why. The only two men who would inherit the land, and Moses told them why they were allowed to inherit it. Caleb entered the land and fought alongside Joshua for 5 years. Here I am, 85. Here I am, 80. Wow. Still strong. So give me the land which was promised to me. Joshua gave him Hebron. Caleb was still relying on God, said, if the Lord is with me, I will drive the inhabitants out, and the land will be for me and my children. He still held the vision. The land would be totally theirs. And they did drive them out. But his vision went beyond the time, his time, to the future of his children and his great grandchildren, and still those to come after them. It was a different spirit that gave him the vision. Fear of God and belief in God's promise. That is what made it possible for Caleb to fully follow God and to endure. It's the reason he received the earthly promise, but it's also why he has a future promise that will be waiting for him and all of us. God gives his people a different spirit so we can fully follow and endure to the end. Jesus said, follow me. It's up to us to choose to follow. But we can't fully follow if we don't fully believe. Paul said every word of God is breathed. Every word is for inspiration and correction. Every word. Not just those we think are big words, holy days, Sabbath, tithing, but also little words many people think are small, like honesty, forgiveness, and love and commitment. Caleb chose to follow God, even though it meant 40 more years wandering, even as he saw others his age dying. He knew he would live to receive his word, to receive his reward. God said so. Both Joshua and Caleb could have become discouraged and angry. It wasn't until Caleb was 85 years of age that he was given Hebron. He always kept his eye on the promises God had given him. When I get discouraged, unhappy, over some remark or someone else's attitude, or when God gives me a trial or a trial, excuse me, I am thankful for the people like Caleb and the others around me who went forward through the hard times. They had their discouragements, they had their setbacks, but they didn't stop. They didn't turn back. I'll close by reading Galatians 5:25. You don't have to turn there. 22 to 25. We all know it very well. And I'll be reading from the Contemporary English Version of the Bible. God's Spirit makes us loving, happy, peaceful, patient, kind, good, faithful, and self-controlled. There is no law against behaving in any of these ways. And because we belong to Jesus Christ, we have killed our selfish feelings and desires. God's Spirit has given us life. And so we should follow the Spirit. When we are facing difficult situations, we can go to God for his help to stir us up. That different spirit God has given us to help us follow and endure, and to keep our eyes on the promise, just as Caleb and the others did. Let's thank God that he gave us a different spirit. Let's stir up that spirit in us and walk in the Spirit like Joshua and Caleb. And let's thank God for the promised land. The promised land we will inherit.